Pleased this morning to welcome both Laurence Jenkins from Reading. Oh, it's not Reading buses, it's Ready buses. Sorry, I've written that wrong. I just realised I put that on there. And Tom Cunnington from TfL, who are also both directors of Women in Bus and Coach, who are going to talk to us about their view of male allies, why they're important, and share a little bit about themselves as well. So, Laurence, I will hand over to you to start us off.
Lovely, thanks, Caroline. So, hi everyone. I'm Laurence Jenkins, Finance Director for Reading Transport. We run Reading buses, Thames Valley buses, and Newbury and District buses. So kind of covering the whole of the Berkshire region. I've been in this role for about 4.5 years. Prior to that, the first 20 years of my career I spent at both National Express, kind of in operational roles, and Transport for London in finance roles. So, as Caroline said, I'm going to talk a little bit about male allies and the importance of them, and what I think good allyship looks like, and it'd be interesting to hear your views on that as well. So first of all, what is an ally and why are male allies important to this movement? Said here, an ally is someone who's not a member of a marginalised group, a particular marginalised group, but supports and takes action to help others in that group. And as to why male allies are important, I think quite often, activity around gender parity, gender equality has been seen as a female preserve. And I think what a lot of businesses are doing wrong is kind of only engaging women on gender equality issues or initiatives, and at the same time kind of struggling to find the right way to speak to men, or particularly men in kind of influential positions in organisations. And I think if we are going to make lasting cultural and organisational change, we need to make sure everyone that's sitting at the table takes accountability and responsibility for making that change happen. So that's why I think it's crucial that men are involved in this movement. By supporting women through allyship, I've said we work towards creating a safer, more inclusive space, and a culture of allyship contributes to a happier, more collaborative workforce, and all the benefits that go along with that in terms of organisational performance, in terms of job satisfaction, and so on. I think just looking at some research, in the absence of male support, women have to shoulder the burden of battling kind of what can be, in some cases, sadly still even in 2024, routine workplace sexism, things like misogynist humour and microaggressions, and that can lead to feeling isolated, lack of inclusion, stress, exhaustion, all of those things that we really don't want. I was looking at a study by I think it was the Talent Innovation Centre, and they found that 1/3 of employees who perceive bias feel alienated at work. I'm surprised it's not higher, to be honest, on that one. But also that 9 in 10 respondents in that same report believe that allies have been valuable in their careers, and that resonates with me personally, because whilst we're talking about male allies in particular here, they can be allies for many different causes. And thinking about when I started back in the industry, in the workplace in general, as a much fresher faced than I am now, 16-year-old, coming into the workforce as quite as a gay, shy kid, really, at the time, it was having my straight allies in the workplace, who incidentally at that time were all female, but having those straight allies who did challenge inappropriate behaviour, inappropriate comments, who made me feel comfortable to be authentic in the workplace. And I credit that to being able to get to the position where I am now. So again, from a personal perspective, I think having that culture of allyship is so beneficial to organisations. And then if we just move on, please, Caroline. Just added some points about what makes a good ally. Or somehow my bit's missing from the top. It should say, sorry, it should say what makes an effective ally. And I've listed some things here. The list isn't exhaustive. These are just my own ideas, and again, be interested to hear kind of what some of you think. But the first one I've said is being conscious and intentional and listening actively. And I think that's really, really important, not to assume people's experience or assume what other people want or need, but actually listen. Let them tell you what their experience is. Let them tell you what their needs are. In my current role at Reading Buses, it was speaking to female employees around some of their other commitments and how they, a significant number of people would prefer different shift patterns or part-time working, for example. And we've always shied away from offering part-time work in the main because the perception or the assumption was, well, people that want to work part-time don't want to do the school run. They don't want to work at our busiest times, which is when we would need part-time drivers, for example, to cover the rush hour. Well, actually, speaking to a number of my female colleagues, that isn't what they necessarily want from part-time working. We've had that as that kind of ingrained assumption, and that's wrong. By listening to our colleagues, we've been able to start crafting and introducing some part-time shifts that have become really popular. Similarly, kind of from those same conversations, I've initiated a project to look at introducing a 4-day working week or a rota that offers a 4-day working week as an alternative to our traditional 5-day out of 7 rotas. And again, that came from listening to what colleagues, in particular female colleagues, want in order to balance their other commitments. So yeah, I think a good ally is open to learning, but also importantly unlearning some of those views or assumptions that are ingrained within us that we've somehow learned over time. Well, actually, we've got to break those down and base it on listening to actually what people are saying, what they want, what are their experiences, and how, and letting them tell us how we can improve things, as well as just coming up with what we think are the right ideas. Another important thing, I think, for allies, one sec, is acknowledging privilege. And I think this is always a real sensitive and difficult one to overcome. And I found a quote online that I think says it way better than I could. Can't remember who actually said it, so I'm plagiarizing without quoting the source, but I'm going to read it out anyway. It says, privilege does not mean that you haven't worked hard to get where you are, or that you've not faced hardships in your own life. Every single one of us has some form of privilege, such as being able-bodied, college-educated, or neurotypical. Some people's privileges add up to be greater than others, and allyship is about using the privileges we do have to advocate for those who don't have the same advantages. And I think that's a really positive way of framing it and thinking about privilege, because we do need to talk about and address privilege. But yeah, as I say, I think it can be quite a sensitive issue that people feel quite defensive about, and I just thought that quote really summed up a really good way to look at it. Also, I think not letting the fear of saying the wrong thing keep you from trying. I think most people care about your intentions, and it's important to, when we do make errors, apologize, learn from them, and do better. I made a horrible mistake a couple of years ago. I think of myself as a very strong ally to the trans and non-binary community, and I have an employee who joined my team a couple of years ago who identifies as non-binary, and I made the absolute horrendous faux pas of misgendering them. They use they them pronouns, and I referred to them as she, which was mortifying. but we were able to have the discussion about that. And as I say, I apologise and made sure I've never made that mistake again, and have also made sure I correct anyone else when they make that mistake. So you're not always going to get it right, but I think we've got to go into it with an open mind, learn, and just make sure we do better and learn from those mistakes. And then really importantly, I think allyship is about taking a stand. It is about calling out inequalities when we see them or when we hear them, whether it is those misogynistic comments or microaggressions, whether it is misgendering, anything like that. It's not just, you can't sit by and let those things pass. It's taking a stand and calling these things out when we see them. And I think for me, on my last point where I've said allyship is it's kind of, I think of it as a verb, as an action, and that's where I see the distinction almost between allyship and support. Allyship is supporting, but it's also taking action as well. Yeah, those are my thoughts.
Thanks, Laurence. I'm gonna pass on to Tom, and then we will open the floor for a few questions. So over to Tom.
Thanks, Caroline. And my bandwidth is warning that it's weak. So if it goes wrong, let me know and I'll turn the camera off because in case it starts breaking up. But so thank you very much for inviting me along to the session this morning. And Laurence, thank you for sort of setting me up brilliantly. Let me start off by saying I'm white, male, middle class and privileged, and I own it, I think, most of the time. And I can't do anything about that. That's who I am. That's the opportunity I've been given in life through my birth and my sexuality, my gender. But that doesn't mean I can't make a difference. And hopefully in the next few minutes, I can talk a bit about how I've tried to make a difference in what I do. I work at Transport for London. I lead the strategy and change activity for the bus network at TfL. I manage a team of about 55 people, of which about 60% are women at the moment. And whilst big bus is in my blood, my team also, our colleagues also run London's Dial-A-Ride. And I also recognise, therefore, the huge value community transport has in society. And also, through my work with Women in Bus and Coach, I know some of our future stars in the industry are women who have started off as volunteer drivers in community transport before they've moved to big bus driving as well. So it goes both ways, and ensuring we continue to work really closely across the industry, across the passenger transport industry, is really important. So great that this initiative is kicking off this morning as well. And in the context of why I'm here this morning, I work with my colleagues Kerry Cheek and Louise Cheeseman at TfL to instigate Women in Bus and Coach, and I was honoured to be asked to join the board when it formalised last year. So just a bit more about kind of my background and how I got to where I am today. So I started off in various other jobs before I came into the bus industry, and in those jobs I didn't really consider diversity. Most of my first managers were women. For example, my first Saturday job at Argos was a woman manager. I worked there in a minority of mainly women. When I left university, I went to work in radio and TV. And again, a pretty even mix of men and women at most levels there. Most of my managers and producers were women, strong women who are role models to me, and I'm sure all the others around me really helped me build my confidence and develop into the workplace and become a better person in the round, as well as a better technical person in the jobs as well. And it's a high pressure environment. It's in the moment, live broadcasting, it's shift work, it's unsocial hours. So actually it's not that different from the jobs that we all do, but it's a very different experience working there in terms of diversity of all sorts compared to when I joined the bus industry now, getting on for 25 years ago. My first job here was working for a bus operator, a small bus operator. I think we had about 2 women drivers out of probably about the 80 drivers that we had in total in the time I was there. So clearly a very poor sort of ratio there as well, and probably led by the sort of work that we did, which was quite often long hours, no toilet facilities really, out on routes in the countryside, not having that support perhaps they felt that they might get working closer to London. But that was the reality of the company I worked for at the time. When I came to TfL, the director was a woman. And I was surprised, therefore, when I came into the business to find that almost all the other managers in the organisation were men. And apart from the stereotypical admin and HR roles, it was pretty male dominated. And strangely enough, quite similar men with quite a macho culture as well. And that was 20 years ago now. So what did we do? What did I do? Well, I'll be honest, not a lot initially. I wasn't managing a big team then. When I recruited, I appointed the best person for the role, as I always have done. But the real problem was not very many women applied for the roles. So therefore, the shortlist that I could, or the pool from which I could shortlist was relatively slim and quite male dominated. And it was really clear that the first way in which we needed to address the lack of gender diversity in particular, but all diversity, was to make sure that we open up the application process to encourage more people to apply to join the team. So I worked with a colleague, Liam, who was of a similar mind to me, and we started off looking at the job descriptions that we had and really reviewed the language using some really good guidance that we found from various sources at the time, and moved away from the sort of operational language and phrases like needing extensive London bus experience or extensive experience of particular technical skills that perhaps people wouldn't have, which only men probably would have from the fact that mostly men were doing those jobs at the moment, and started talking far more about the skills and the capabilities of what was needed. And that made a real difference. But actually, more recently, what I found is talking about the outcomes, the purpose of the role, what it's going to achieve is a real game changer in terms of opening up the eyes about how people consider roles in transport. So talking about the environmental benefits, the safety benefits, the community benefits that Maggie talked about earlier on as well, really important to get people, the sort of people I want working in the team, to come and apply and see that this is a role for them. Don't worry about what the sector is. This is what you can do. This is the outcome you can achieve. This is how you can, have a job that you really value in that context. And now I've upset our HR team in our job descriptions by removing words like essential and desirable from the knowledge, skills, and experience. I suspect it's still true. Many men will go, oh, I can do most of the things on there. I'll have a go at applying to it. And quite a lot of women looking at job descriptions will go, well, I can do most of them, but I'm not sure about those two there. So perhaps, or particularly if it says it's desirable or essential, I'm not going to apply because it's not for me. I've moved away from that and started talking about needing a broad mix of the requirements under the knowledge, skills, and experience there. And that again has made a difference. And now I think I'm getting well over half of the applicants to roles I'm advertising are women, and also people who aren't white, and other characteristics as well. So making sure that piece around what we're applying for gender initially is actually working across a much wider range of individuals as well. So yeah, suddenly about half the applications were from women. And you won't be surprised to know on this group here that in many cases, women were the best candidates. So my team now is around 2/3 women. All 5 of my direct report senior managers are women, 3 of whom have been promoted from within the team through the support we've given them. And we now use anonymised recruitment across TfL. Now, I'm not a fan personally of anonymised recruitment, possibly because I'm recruiting at senior level and therefore it might be a bit different there. But I do think it's made a difference in other parts of the business, particularly at more operational and entry level roles as well, and particularly with other managers who perhaps are more likely to apply their unconscious bias to selection processes as well. So it has worked in TfL as a whole, even though I do think it's got its limitations if we don't use it carefully. So I've talked about getting more people to apply for roles, being able to appoint more people for roles by having the right selection process and making sure we do get rid of that unconscious bias and we have proper panels to recruit and make evidence-based decisions on who we recruit. But making sure we then retain and develop people in the team is critical. Providing coaching and mentoring has been really important to me, and I'm proud to see many people, mainly women, but men and women as well, that I've supported over the years progress to senior roles. Some of them actually more senior than me, which is a real positive thing. I think that in that fact I've been able to help them on that little bit of a step up to perhaps start them on that career boost in the future. And what's really important, and my team feedback to me, is giving credit for the work done. Really making sure I encourage people to raise their own profiles by speaking at senior meetings and conferences. And why do I do it? Well, it's just the right thing to do. I don't want to be the person that achieves everything. My team do all the work in my team. They need to they need to get the credit for it. They need to be seen doing it. They need to get the credit for it and build their own confidence doing that. So making sure I give every opportunity to do that is really important. Pay parity is really important to me as well. All the roles at each grade in my team are on very similar salaries. That wasn't always the case, and it's not perfect, but it's pretty much the case now. We've got rid of a lot of the gender pay gaps in the area that I've got direct control over. And that's a problem sometimes because men are far more pushy when it comes to salaries when we're offering them jobs. And I've actually said no to some really good men who've asked for more money than the rate that I'm prepared to pay, because it's just not worth creating pay gaps. It creates dissent when people find out about it. And in an organisation like TfL, where we publish pay or certainly pay bands for most roles now, it's really clear that people can work out that others in the team perhaps have paid more than them, and it's just not worth that aggravation, whether it's around gender or anything else. So that's been a real focus of mine as well. And flexible working is an area that I've really supported as well over the years as well. But TfL's got always had a funny policy whereby it said that if someone works 3 or 4 days a week, we should encourage it. But until recently, I just needed to accept that I didn't have someone in a role for 1 or 2 days a week. And that's fine if you've got 1 or 2 people in the team of 20 or 30 doing that. But I ended up with quite a lot of people working 3 or 4 days a week. And so I've approached our HR department and we've agreed a more flexible approach now where I can add together all of those 3 and 4 days a week to create a full-time equivalent. And I've managed to tot up all those spare 1 and 2 days to create more roles. And that therefore spreads the load more evenly across the team. It means that we've got cover across the days when people aren't working and they don't feel that they need to work or check emails on their non-working days. Because if they're not working, they shouldn't be working. And it's really important that we support people when we genuinely create flexible working around how that works as well. So that's been a real positive thing, which other parts of TfL are now looking to replicate as well. In TfL, we encourage job shares, but officially that's always required the individuals to come to me as a pair of 2 people that say we want to work together. And then for interviews and promotions, they both need to pass the grade. And I'm not sure that's right because that assumes that both people are ready to progress at the same time. Both people have got the skills and experience that I need. So I think it's my job to resource that as a team. And therefore, what I'm looking to do and what I am doing more now is encouraging people to come to me saying they want to work part-time. And it's my job to match up those days that people want to work with the resources that I've got available to me to pay them, the number of days I've got available in a year for people to work, and make sure I get the right combinations there to build a team. So it's not the individual's job to do that. That's my job as a leader to make sure I get the teams together. And I'm working more widely with the TfL to get, again, that more widely adopted as well. And we also actively considered flexible working from day one in TfL before the law that's just coming in was there as well, really because that was encouraging people back into work, into substantially full-time jobs, because I'm really keen that we encourage people that have left the workplace for caring responsibilities, which we know is very, very often women, to make sure they have full-time or the equivalent of broadly full-time fulfilling jobs when they may still have caring responsibilities. So how can we make sure that they are 3 or 4 days a week, they feel that they're proper jobs rather than perhaps going into some of the careers which are less perhaps career orientated in the future as well. And I think my final point really is to say how having a more diverse and balanced workforce has helped me to develop. I found women managers have been far better at supporting my personal development and encouraging me. I think by having a more balanced team across the piece, then we've got a much better culture across the team as well. And I feel genuinely supported by my whole team at all levels. You know, I don't feel that anyone there is not there to support me as an individual when I need it. And I think that's felt across the team, up and down, across all the levels there as well. And that's just by making the team feel more inclusive and a better place to work. So my final comment is I've been invited here to talk about male allyship. Now, I'm really not comfortable calling myself a male ally. I'm flattered and honoured when women refer to me as that, but I'm not sure that it's my job to define myself as that. I just try and do the right thing. But I am honoured to have been invited onto the Women in Bus and Coach board in recognition of perhaps some of the things I have done and some of my approaches to improving opportunities in my team as well. And I'm really honoured to be on this session today with so many other brilliant speakers to show my commitment to improving opportunities and representation for women in our industry. So thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Laurence.